Hello BookTube! For this Tag Tuesday, I will be doing the A to Z Hot or Not tag. This tag was created by Greg of Another Bibliophile Reads, and I will leave a link to his channel and a copy of the prompts in the show notes down below. A. Audiobooks. I am not on audiobooks. The few times that I have listened to audiobooks, I do not retain what was narrated. I am always distracted by other things, and they don't work for me. B. Bildungsroman. Dealing with a person's formative years or spiritual education. I'm hot on. I rather like Bildungsromans. C. Children's books. Not. While I really enjoyed children's books when I was a child, I've outgrown them. D. Digital. I'm not on the digital books or ebooks. Because I know objectively the digital books or ebooks have any number of advantages over physical books. But I still just do not gravitate towards them. I want physical copies of my books. I love the tactile feel of physical books. I love reading physical books. And with all of the advantages that ebooks have, they just do not emotionally compare to physical books. E. Experimental. I'm not on experimental. I find that experimental books very rarely work. Or they work in some ways, but they fall apart in other ways. F. Fantasy. Now, this one is tough because, on the one hand, despite the fact that fantasy is my favorite genre of fiction, I haven't really enjoyed fantasy in a very long time. Not very long time, about 3 years. I've been struggling the last few years with fantasy. And so on that level, not. But if you look behind me, I have a ton of manga, which are all fantasy. So I'm still very hot on fantasy. I am creatively hot on fantasy. As much as I have come to love reading history for its own sake, I am also in the back of my mind reformulating, drawing inspiration from these narratives in order to create fantastical worlds and fantastical stories. So I'm still very hot on fantasy, just not reading fantasy in prose form. Which is probably why I continue to have conversations about this, is because I do not understand what is going on. It's one of the many mysteries of my reading life that I do not quite understand. But anyway, G. Graphic novel. I am very hot on graphic novel. Once again, behind me are hundreds of volumes of manga. So, yeah, I'm loving it. So, yeah, very hot on graphic novels, even if they're not manga. Although all of that I have in my collection are manga. H. Horror. I'm not. Horror has never really done it for me. And if it does, it's got to be like another genre and horror. So, say, for example, the work of Clark Ashton Smith, which is horror but tinged with fantasy or science fiction. Inspirational. I am not on inspirational. J, journalism. I'll go with not. I'm not too fond of journalistic nonfiction, particularly if it tries to pass as history. K for kitsch. Has a popular or sentimental appeal. I guess I'm hot, but I'm not entirely sure if... Because I don't really think of kitsch in literary terms. I think of kitsch as in decorative terms, in which case I'm not on. L for library. I don't quite remember if by this Greg means going to the library or like your personal collection, your personal library. I mean, I'm hot on both, even though I have not gone to the library in years. I mean, I'm still hot on it. I mean, they're still wonderful resources, and my personal library, I absolutely love it. So I'm very hot on my personal library as well. M for mystery. I'm not. So when I was younger, mystery was my favorite genre of fiction. I think I was my preteens to very early teens. I could not get enough of mystery, especially Agatha Christie. But there was this sort of like taste change or something that happened, and I could care less about mystery now, except for Agatha Christie, and even that is... I'm probably back on I could probably get rid of my Agatha Christie collection because I don't feel all that compelled to reread her, which makes me wonder exactly what my participation in March Mystery Madness is going to be next year. Whether I want to or just try to do a month of March of the Mammoths. We'll see. In for nonfiction, I'm hot on nonfiction. I really enjoy nonfiction, especially history. O for omnibus. I'm hot on omnibus. I love books that bring together a number of shorter books or shorter work together. I mean, I have a huge number of... I have several Agatha Christie omnibuses, and I have a John le Carré omnibus. I have a few manga omnibuses, particularly the big one-volume edition of Death Note. P for poetry. I'm hot on poetry. I've really started to get back into poetry the last few years, and a number of slim volumes of poetry that I've collected, I'm quite pleased with. And I'm sorely tempted... I've been sorely tempted to actually binge buy a number of poetry collections. Although you'll have to wait and see until at the end of November and at the end of December whether or not I actually do buy a ton of poetry. Q for quests. When the protagonist goes on a quest physically or spiritually, I'm hot on. I rather like quest narratives and other sort of adventure narratives, but I actually quite like the quest. R for romance. I'm thinking by this he means like romantic love fiction, rather than sort of in the medieval sense of an adventure story. I think I'm not on. And this has nothing to do with snobbery. It just, I'm not that interested. And the few times that I have tried to read romantic fiction, it just doesn't work. So I'm not. S for science fiction, I am, again, much like with fantasy, it's reading prose science fiction, I'm not on. Even though science fiction, although not as much as fantasy, is one of my favorite genres of fiction. But again, since 2020, I have struggled with science fiction, like I have with fantasy. Although I still love watching science fiction movies and television. And while science fiction isn't quite as sort of creatively interesting for me as fantasy is, I do have some ideas for science fiction stories. So this is a qualified hot, I think. T for translation. Books translated from one language into another, I am hot on. I am a monoglot reader, so works and translations are absolutely necessary. U for Übermensch. The Superman or the extraordinary human. Characters who can do everything. So I'm not entirely sure if that quite is what is properly meant by Übermensch, but I do like superhuman fiction. I do like, so I guess I'm hot on, at least as Greg is defining it. Probably not in what its original meaning is. Because I don't know if I've ever actually read anything that quite matches the original meaning. But let's just go with superhumans in sort of the American superhero comics way, or sort of a more superpowered magic way. I'm very hot on. Again, behind me, tons of manga, most of which do feature superhumans. And I do love American superhero comics, even though I do not have any in my collection right now, which is kind of one of my regrets. Let's move on to V. Victorian literature from 1837 to 1901. Oh, I'm not on Victorian literature right now. I tried to participate in this most recent Victober, and it failed miserably. Pretty much every time I participate in Victober, it fails miserably. I'm just not really into Victorian literature right now. In fact, I think I'm probably going to purge what Victorian literature I have in my collection the next time I do a purge of my library. W for Western. I'm not on. Again, it's nothing to do with snobbery. It's just I'm not that interested in the genre. And the few times that I have read Westerns, they haven't gone over well. Mainly Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, which I have bailed on twice. So X for X-rated. I'm hot on if it's done well, and depending what kind of X-rated it is. Y for young adult, not. Even though most of the manga I collect, which is a shonen manga, which are manga geared or aimed at boys in the middle grade, young adult, slightly past young adult age brackets. When it comes to prose fiction, young adult has never really done it for me. And finally, Z for Zeitgeist. Spirit or mood of the times. I guess I'm hot on, depending what kind it is. But I haven't really given it much thought. So that was the A to Z Halternaut tag. If you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged. And let me see. Yeah. Um, so yeah, if you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged. I will be back tomorrow with either another video of some kind or other, or like a tag video. I mean, I've been working on some original tags. In fact, I was hoping to do one this week, but things happened, and I'm going to push it back to next week. And I also want to do a bit more thinking about the tag and also how much explanation I need to do in the prompts um, and stuff. So, anyway, BookTube, until I see you next time, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.